Pleased to have Paula Becker with us to present Rare, Threatened, and Endangered Species of Maryland. Paula is an outreach ecologist with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Naturalist Heritage Program. Her current duties include volunteer coordination and outreach for the state's non-game and endangered species program, as well as rare species surveys and habitat restoration. And with that, I will turn it over to Paula.
Good evening, everyone, and what a fine, exquisite late summer evening it is. I'm happy to see some of my former students and master naturalists and a few volunteers in the audience. Hi, everybody. Excuse me, my beagle thinks it's her job to be on camera. Okay, let's get started. So, what does it mean? Oops, sorry, where'd we go? I was asked to speak on Maryland's rare, threatened, and endangered species. This program was put together with my colleague, Sarah Witcher, who is one of our education biologists. So it includes a lot of information on several different topics that fall underneath rare, threatened, and endangered species. There will be several pages where there are QR codes to find out more information. What I'm going to do is to create a PDF of all of those QR code pages and send that to the Nature Council so you guys can also use the PDF if you need to scan for more information. So we're going to start off with quite possibly the cutest endangered extirpated species in Maryland, or extirpated no longer in Maryland. This is a picture of a snowshoe hare kit, and it's listed endangered extirpated because it was last seen in 1986. And this includes one of the classifications that we use when we're talking about rare, threatened, and endangered species. So to begin with, I would like to start with some introductions. That's me with the machete on the left, and that is Sarah on the right, looking so much safer than I am. We are with the Maryland Natural Heritage Program, which is your non-game and endangered species program. Our tasks can be broken down into 4 general groups. Population surveys, which is basically finding out what is out there and how many of them there are. We put all of this in a master database, which is part of a network of rare species databases that is maintained by the nonprofit group known as NatureServe. And we all use the same protocols, so our information is comparable. We do ecosystem and habitat management, which means if we find a place where there are or should be some rare species, we try to make them as welcome as possible by building it, and they will come. We call many of these natural areas, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Environmental review takes that master database that we have, and if any of your counties require you, and all of them do, require you to submit a project, say building a house or changing vegetation or moving a road, that project has to come to my office. We review it to see if it's going to have any impact on sensitive species. And we let the county and all the appropriate parties know. And of course, there's environmental education, which is what this is. Thanks for joining us. What do I mean when I say species or population surveys? We could be looking for rare species like bog turtles, or who's that in the middle? Baby goshawks, or wood turtles, which is the one on the right. And we have statewide authority. We spend most of our time on state lands, on publicly owned lands. We no longer do as many surveys on private lands as we used to, only in very specific occasions. For instance, the bog turtles, which is on the federal endangered species list as a threatened species. The majority of those populations are on private lands, so we have good partnerships with private landowners. We may be surveying for amphibians like the hellbender, which also has my favorite casual name, snot otter, which is our largest salamander. They top out about 2.5 feet. They are fully aquatic. There was a time when they were clocking in at about 4 feet, but we haven't seen 4-footers in a very long time. They like to live under rocks in particularly clean water. And in Maryland, that now means the Castleman River and the Youghiogheny. We might be looking for the eastern tiger salamander on the eastern shore, which likes to lay its eggs in January in these frozen over ponds. So our biologists don hopefully insulated waders and go looking for egg masses in ice-covered ponds. Oh, how we suffer. When we talk about habitat restoration, we often work with our colleagues in the Wildlife Management Area Unit, creating meadows or maintaining wetlands or creating surrogate cavities, which is what bird boxes are. We also, the beauty of wildlife management areas is that you can visit them and you can hike on them. Just make sure that you read the schedule of events to make sure you're not walking through the middle of a scheduled hunt. Please wear your blaze orange. When we're doing ecosystem restoration, that means we're not just looking at the individual species. It means we're looking at the processes that helped shape an ecosystem. And very often, and more, we are realizing that that includes fire. The more research we do, of course, the more we find out that fire is a really important part of, it's an important type of disturbance that helps shape plant composition and therefore animal composition in our natural areas. We work with our Maryland Park Service and, as I said, our wildlife management area folks to help carry out hunting for various species, largely because deer are one of those disruptors, and our deer population in Maryland is large and healthy, so much so that they're having a huge impact on a lot of our rare plants. And there's always education. This is Sarah down at the Wetlands and Wildlife Field Days in Somerset County, where every third grader in the county has to attend and learn all kinds of cool stuff. We also work with a lot of partners, including our game program, when we help support programs like the National Archery in Our Schools program. We also work with the Nature Conservancy and other non-governmental organizations. We work with universities like Frostburg and College Park and Hopkins and some out-of-state researchers as well, because there's almost 1 million acres of public land in Maryland and 6.2 million Marylanders, and we can't do it all in-house. So it's important that we have really useful partnerships. Also under education, we also host at least one Master Naturalist program down in Annapolis, but a couple of our state parks like Cunningham Falls also operate Master Naturalist training. We oversee the Envirothon for high schoolers. We also oversee Project Wild training. So any educators out there who would like to incorporate nature into their regular school curriculum, that's what Project Wild is for. Okay, so that's the background information. Let's talk about rare plants and animals. What exactly is rare? You'll notice here the word rare is small r. That is merely a descriptor that gives us a relative number of how many number of individuals in a particular species. So something is rarer than something that is common. But then we have terms that have legal definitions as well. When we talk about the rare plants of Maryland, my program tracks a little over 950 plants that are considered not just rare, meaning there are not many of them on the landscape, but some of them also have legal protections. we track just over 300 rare animal species, that's vertebrates and invertebrates. And we also recognize that there are over 300 species of plants and animals that have gone extinct since European contact. All right, so when I'm talking about legal status, this is the status that is followed by both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and all of rare species programs across the United States. And they are measured at both a global, national, and subnational, which means state level. We call it subnational because our Canadian friends also use the S ranking when they're talking about provincial lists. You can go to the NatureServe website. They have this excellent database. If you ever want to know anything about how rare an animal is or a plant, plants always get the short end of the stick, but plants too. NatureServe maintains an even more monster database that incorporates all of rare species information from all of their partners, both at state level, provincial level, and in some cases, all of the countries in Central and South America, and moving into the Asia Pacific ring as well. So we use words like extinct, which means the species is gone. It's never coming back. Popular extinct species include Tyrannosaurus rex. And I'm trying to think, oh, there are some excellent tree ferns that have also become extinct, although there are some that are still extant in Australia. We don't have those. Extirpated means it's extinct from an area, but it still exists somewhere else. Like that snowshoe hare, it is extirpated from Maryland, but they still exist elsewhere. Endangered means it is critically imperiled and may become extinct within the foreseeable future. Threatened is one step back, meaning imperiled and could become endangered within the foreseeable future. Rare has no legal definition. It just lets people know that there are not too many of whatever species it is. In need of conservation is a phrase that we use for animals, meaning we know their numbers are declining. We cannot yet call them threatened. They do not yet have a legal status, but we know they're headed that way. And then the one that everybody wants to be is secure. And you can see the summary of the federally listed species and state listed species for Maryland. And you'll see that in Maryland, we have 39 plant and animal species that are on the federal endangered species list as either endangered or threatened. And then you can see the number breakdown for endangered, threatened, in need of conservation, endangered, extirpated, and that brings us up to our totals for plants and animals. I'll give you a few minutes to digest this. Haha. Conservation rank. This is not a legal status, but it is a numerical quantifier of what we mean when we're talking about how rare something is. This system was originally designed by the Nature Conservancy. And when the Conservancy went around state to state, setting up a natural heritage program in every state, beginning back in the 1970s, we all agreed that this would be the ranking system that we would use, so that every member in this NatureServe network that was started by the Nature Conservancy, we're all using the same numbers, we're all using the same descriptions and same definitions. So it makes it so much easier when we have to compare information. So any kind of a rank that begins with G means it is a global rank. So whatever the descriptor is, be it endangered, historical, extirpated, rare, whatever, that is at a global level. So anything G1, 2, or 3 is incredibly rare. G4 and G5 means globally secure. When we put an S in front of the number, S1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, we're talking about how comfortable these species are in a given state or province. So S1 and 2 are very rare and endangered of either becoming extinct or listing as endangered. S3 is sort of a middle of the pack. It means it's declining and we're keeping an eye on it. So we call that watch list. S4 and S5 are relatively secure. All right, so that's the words that help us define what we're talking about. And you can see the state lists of both plants and animals on our website. The last version was updated in March of 2021. As the fortune cookie is telling us, there will be an update soon. Because there are approximately 1,100 species in each one of these documents, it means our state botanist and our state zoologist have to go through every one of those species and update them with whatever information we have, and then decide if we need to uplist or downlist that species. So it can take several years for it to happen. So the animals were last done in 23 and 2021 for the plants. I know that our state botanist, Chris Fry, is working on them. I do not have a date as to when they will be ready. But in addition to these state lists, we also have created county lists. So if you want to know what's rare in your county, you can find it on the DNR website. All right, let's talk about some rare mammals. That little cutie on the left-hand side, it is a skunk, but it's not the striped skunk. It is the spotted skunk. The last time it was seen was 1967 in Maryland, so it is currently listed as extirpated. But we believe that its numbers declined drastically due to overtrapping and predation. And that other fluffy on the right-hand side is the Delmarva fox squirrel. As its name tells you, it only occurs on the Delmarva Peninsula. Oh, the spotted skunk was only seen in Garrett County, so it's a western species. So eastern species would be the Delmarva fox squirrel, only found on the Delmarva Peninsula. You can actually see these at Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. They're a pretty big, beefy squirrel, as most fox squirrels are. These are a subspecies. So the overall species of fox squirrel, Cyrus niger, is secure, but this particular subspecies is on the federal endangered species list. They like a habitat that is no longer very common. They like old growth. They like open pine forests. They spend a lot of time on the ground. So we have over 20 species of mammals that are rare, threatened, or endangered in Maryland. And there are several reasons why they might be put on this list. It could be loss of habitat. The older pine forests of the Eastern Shore have largely been converted to other uses. Could be agriculture, could be towns. And with the spotted skunk, because we know its numbers decline due to overtrapping and predation by other naturally occurring predators, some of that is under our control, some of it is not. And there are other species that used to be rare, but they are not anymore, including the black bear, the fisher, which is a big beefy weasel. If you haven't seen them, they are spectacular. The bobcat, we do have bobcats in Maryland, coyotes, and beavers. Beavers are the reason that we have wildlife management regulations at all, because they were overtrapped by 1650. So even before we were a nation, we started out with wildlife regulations. There we are. How about bats? The northern long-eared bat. Look at those excellent ears. Isn't that an adorable face? So the northern long-eared bat, as with several of our other bat species, we have 10 currently species in Maryland, possibly more than that. We're still waiting on some identification. The northern long-eared bat is both a state and federally endangered species, and it is a victim of white nose syndrome, which is caused by a fungus. Of the 10 species of bats in Maryland, most of them are either a listed species with legal protections, like the northern long-eared bat, or their numbers are declining so quickly that we expect they will be on the endangered species list fairly soon. And that includes, sadly, what used to be our most common bat, the little brown bat. The white nose syndrome has really affected those bats that hibernate in our caves and train tunnels. And the bats that actually, let's see, what do we have? 6 species of our bats are hibernators. The other 4 migrate. So those that are hibernators tend to, cluster together. And as we know, diseases spread to each other when we cluster together. This little cutie, they're all cute. I'm just going to say it. They're all cute. This is why I went into this business. This is the Allegheny wood rat. It is a native rodent. It does not have a bald tail, so don't freak out about a bald tail. It has a furry brown tail. It's really cute. They are found in Western Maryland, largely in places where there are rock falls, because this wood rat likes to hole up in little areas in the rock outcroppings as habitat. They are pack rats. They collect stuff. They store their food in middens, and some people consider them a keystone species because, and there are some people who argue with that definition, but a keystone species is one that other species rely on. If you took the wood rat out of its ecosystem, other species would continue to survive, but it would change the ecosystem quite a bit because it plays a role as an indicator species. So it lets us know the health of the ecosystem in which it lives. It disperses seeds. As a rodent, it eats mostly seeds, but it will also eat the occasional grub or insect that it finds, because we all need protein. And because it disperses seeds, if you take this animal out of its ecosystem, it will change plant composition of a given forested area. Their particular food caches and their latrines actually provide habitat for other species, particularly specialized cave invertebrates. And they are a food source for anybody who can catch them, frankly, but largely for owls, black rat snakes, and bobcats. Look at the little face. Okay, so those were some of our mammals. How about some of our rare birds? We have 72 species of rare, threatened, and endangered birds in Maryland. The common tern, which is globally secure, but it is highly state rare, largely because loss of habitat. And anyone who watched Outdoors Maryland last night may have seen the episode where guys in my office, ologists, our state avian ecologist, Dave Brinker, and his colleagues have created this floating island. It's temporary in that it's these little docks that clip together, and you can float it out into the coastal bays, and it's covered in gravel and actually crushed shell. And what it does is that it mimics beaches where terns, least terns, common terns, several other terns, royal terns will actually create their little scrapes. They don't make a real nest, but it's more like a scrape, and lay their eggs there. And we've lost that type of beach, these sandy, gravelly, cobbly beaches. So by creating this fake island, this artificial island, and putting up those little pup tents, are little wooden angles that were painted by local school kids, and that offers the chicks shade, which they would find on a gravelly beach under small plants. So we've got plastic aquarium plants out there, and we've got little shade tents for the chicks. And this is working. It's been out there for 4 years now, and it's working. The problem is a lot of our islands within the coastal bays have eroded to sea level rise and changing, not really changing flow patterns, but just more people on boats creating more wakes, which increases the erosion on the islands. So this is a temporary fix at best. We have done some rebuilding of a couple of islands using dredge spoil. When they clear the channels, we take the stuff that they've cleared out at the base of the shipping channels and blown it onto islands to help rebuild those islands that have been eroded by sea level rise. So we're still working on figuring out a more permanent solution on giving these guys some habitat. But for the time being, the tern raft works pretty well. Look at that cute little tern baby. Oh, so cute. Toot toot. This is the northern saw-whet owl. For many years, we thought they just migrated through Maryland. But as we learned just last year, there is actually a small breeding population up in Garrett County. They are our smallest owl, clocking in at about 4.5 to 5 inches. We do migration surveys of them when they fly through. We put out mist nets. We'll be starting that in October, and we collect information any day that we have someone who can operate the mist nets. We never leave the mist nets open full time. If you have not seen a mist net, it looks like a very, very tall volleyball net. So an owl flies through, or anybody flies through, gets tangled in the net. It doesn't kill them, but it does capture them. And we check the net every hour, disentangle them, take some measurements, including eye color, which helps us determine age. And we look at their wings, because you can look at their wings under UV light, and those pink feathers are the newer ones because they are photoluminescent. There is a pigment, a porphyrin pigment in the feathers, and this glows that magenta color under UV lights, and it fades over time. So we know if those wing feathers, those under feathers, are very, very pink, they are fresh, they are this year's, and then they start to fade each year. That's one way that we age the birds. And you can see, compared to the person's hands, this is not a very big owl, but it is a very feisty owl. When we weigh them, we actually, it's a little embarrassing. We put them in an empty orange juice concentrate ring. You can also use toilet paper tubes. And their head picks out one side and their feet pick out the other side. And you can tell the hatred in their eyes and how much they want to kill us. But they look so silly in the toilet paper roll. And that way we can handle them without them getting stressed out, or at least without them flailing about and hurting themselves and hurting us. We also put bracelets. We put bands on their ankles. And so that if they get caught again, we can track their locations, where they've been. Oh, I'm sorry. They're not breeding in Garrett County, but they are overwintering in Garrett County. My mistake. The American goshawk, also sometimes called the northern goshawk. This gorgeous, gorgeous bird, which has been kept by falconers for over 2,000 years. We are at the southern end of their range. They like to nest in large trees, usually large pines, and those tend to be up on top of the Allegheny Plateau. And for many years, we saw their numbers creeping into Maryland, and we were getting very excited. And then one year we had 3 nests. And someone came along, some human being came along and destroyed those nests. We don't know how that person found out about them. But as this is not only a state listed bird, the U.S. Forest Service, the Forest Service, so the USDA Forest Service, includes it on its sensitive species list, which means anybody doing any kind of logging in that area has to get not only a permit to log there, but also it's a time of year issue, so we can't bother them if they are nesting. And that's not just because they're a sensitive species, it's also because they are a migratory bird and a raptor, and therefore they and their habitat are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. So we're very excited. We think they're on their way to nesting again out in Western Maryland. The salt marsh sparrow, under the heading of LBB, little brown bird. But they are so underappreciated. They are a state endangered species. Their populations are declining rapidly due to loss of habitat. And if I tell you that their habitat is a salt marsh, you can make a pretty good guess that that habitat is going away due to sea level rise. We do know that the surveys have estimated a decline of about 9% per year between 1998 and 2012, which indicates an overall loss of 75% of the global population in that time. A lot of our shorebirds, the wading birds, are also protected under critical area laws for those counties that have tidal water. Frederick does not, but everybody on the Potomac south of DC, basically everybody south of Great Falls, and then every county along Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic counties as well. What about reptiles? We have a few. The two that are on our list in this picture, when it comes to turtles, are the wood turtle, which is the lower left hand. And you can look at its shell, it looks like it's carved wood. So that's why we know it's a wood turtle. And that little cutie up above is the bog turtle. The bog turtle has federal recognition as a threatened species. And I also include a picture of our state turtle, the terrapin, the diamondback terrapin. We know that their numbers are declining, and we know why. At least we know one of the reasons why their numbers are declining, and that's because they get caught in crab pots. So we have now required, this orange device is called a bycatch reduction device or a turtle exclusion device, BIRD or TED, and it means that the smaller turtles can still get out. If they were small enough to get in through the turtle exclusion device, they can still get out, but it keeps the larger turtles from getting in and drowning in a crab pot. And that's required for commercial, and I don't think it's required yet for recreational crabbers, but it is strongly recommended. So bog turtles are our smallest turtle. They max out at about 4.5 inches from shell length. They like a very particular type of wetland. Technically, it's not a bog. If you want to argue with the wetlands scientists, a bog will only happen where there has been peat soil and it's usually high elevation. And we don't have that kind of habitat in Maryland. There is sort of a dip in the population down from Pennsylvania into central Maryland. So our bogs are technically umbrotrophic fens. I know you were hanging on that, which just means it is a ground-fed wetland with a gravel underlayment, and the majority of the vegetation is grass-like. So it could include cattails, grasses, sedges, rushes, that sort of thing. We can only survey for bog turtles during a 2-month period when they are above the soil. They are a fossorial turtle. They like to dig, and they spend most of their life underground. But when it's mating season, they have to come up and to find someone to mate with, and that's when we do our turtle surveys. The wood turtles are another aquatic turtle. although they do spend some time on land, they tend to be near slow-moving rivers, streams. And unfortunately, in case of both of these species, one of the reasons they are rare is because of the illegal pet trade, which bugs me. I don't see why people have to have wild animals as pets, but I recognize that they are out there. So people poach these from the wild and then try and sell them as pets. Sometimes those animals are confiscated by our wildlife officers. But then the challenge is we can't just toss them back out into the wild again because they could have contracted some disease. And we don't want to introduce that disease back into the wild. So there are some fairly complex steps we have to go through to get a health certificate to make sure that they're safe to go out. But we also want to make sure that we send them back to where they were confiscated from, what part of the country they came from, which involves moving animals around. And every time you move an animal, you stress it out, which can cause health issues. So it's never, unfortunately, just a matter of taking it from somebody who stole it and putting it back out into the wild. Snakes! This exquisitely gorgeous snake is the rainbow snake. Isn't she beautiful? This snake is only found in Charles County and Montgomery County. We have not found them anywhere else. She is an S1 species. That means she is incredibly rare. And as you can see by her beauty, this is something that people might want to collect. But she also has a very limited, not just range, but also habitat type. So that can also be a challenge. Our other endangered snake is the mountain earth snake. Those are our only two state endangered snakes, but we expect that other snakes are going to slither into that category. Sorry, because we know that there's an awful lot of habitat loss. And for those animals that have limited habitat type, it makes it very difficult to keep them secure in their ranges. In the amphibian department, we have the green salamander. Look at its pink toes, but it's called the green salamander, and you'll only find that in Western Maryland. And on the right, we have the mountain chorus frog. And as its name tells you, it will only be found in the mountain section of Maryland. And both of these animals have very limited habitat types. This is another one where, unfortunately, they're not setting themselves up for success, but also when you already have a limited distribution, and it just means that you're vulnerable to habitat loss, to contamination, to other things that cause endangerment. With amphibians in particular, because their lives depend on two types of habitats, two lives, amphibian, that's what that means. Any change in either one of those habitats can have a huge impact. They are very much limited to habitat near some kind of water source, be it running water or still water or a vernal pool. And it usually means there's a time of year restriction on them. So, and they need to be able to walk from their aquatic habitat to their terrestrial habitat, if that's the kind of an amphibian they are. So it means not just their two habitat types, but the corridor between those two habitat types. And I am very, very pleased to say, years ago, we made these really excellent posters for all of our reptiles and amphibians. And now those posters are being updated with all of the new names from taxonomic changes and any new species and any new ranks and any new legal status changes. They are coming soon. They are at the printers this week. Woohoo! Which means if you are a teacher and you would like to hang these up in your classroom, drop us a line. We can either send you the free PDF and you can print it out on your own, or we're figuring out a way to sell these to people for a nominal price, just enough to cover the printing. basically. But we've got a bunch of new pictures. Our salamander pictures in particular are lovely. One photographer did all of them. He did such a great job. All right, let's talk about some aquatics. So here's that hellbender again, the snot otter, the Allegheny alligator. That's one of its other names. It is a fully aquatic salamander, and it requires really clean water. Two other aquatic species we can talk about. One is endemic, or was endemic to Maryland, and that would be the Maryland darter, that upper picture. Unfortunately, the Maryland darter had a very, very limited range. It was last seen in 1988 in a particular stream type with riffles up in Harford County. And unfortunately, there was a really big storm, and a farmer who had a manure containment system, which was up to code. Unfortunately, the manure containment system failed after this particularly heavy rainfall and flooding, and all of the manure sluiced right into the stream. And we haven't, and messed up all of the riffles, which was the habitat type that the Maryland darter really loved. So it's now considered extirpated, and I expect it in the next iteration of the rare species list, it will be formally designated as extinct. And it was only ever found in Maryland, which is such a bummer. Another very snazzy fish is the black-banded sunfish. It's only about 2.5 inches large. And because it is so cute, it's one that has been poached for the illegal pet trade. And it's found in the Delaware River and in the Nanticoke on the eastern shore. But really, that's about it. If you find it, that's where you're going to find it. But it's not just people with backbones. It's also people without backbones, including the extremely beautiful Bethany Beach firefly. You can probably guess where that one is found. Basically, only at Bethany Beach. It is on both the federal and state endangered species list. It's only found in small pockets of areas around Bethany. And the only way you can tell it apart from similar fireflies is by the flash pattern, which is how we do a lot of firefly surveys anyway. You sit out at night in a lawn chair and you watch the flash patterns. Is it a dot, dot, dash, dot, dot, and then a falling dash? Or is it a dot, 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 dash, and then a fall? This is how we tell fireflies apart. Another very snazzy insect is the tiger beetle, which is on the right. This is the Puritan tiger beetle, and it only likes to live in the sandstone bluffs along the Chesapeake. 95% of the world's global population of the Puritan tiger beetle is found in Maryland, in those sandstone bluffs. And the thing about the sandstone bluff, which is what the tiger beetle likes, is that it erodes. And it creates pockets where they can bore into the bluff and lay their eggs, and that's where they breed. The problem is the people living at the top of those bluffs do not want their property to erode into the bay. So there is the challenge is allowing people to not lose their property while still maintaining the habitat for this globally rare insect. It's a I think it's a G1, which means it is incredibly rare globally. And in the center, we have an Edwards hairstreak, which likes particular types of grasslands. And its host plant, where it likes to lay its eggs, its larval host plant, is the bare oak, or Quercus ilicifolia, which is not a rare tree. It's just not very widely distributed. There are only 5 known populations of this species in the state. And what about our state insect, the Baltimore checker spot? I don't have a picture of it here, but that one's on the decline because it prefers a very particular type of wetland, and its host plant, the turtlehead, is also a rare plant. So if you have a rare animal that depends upon a rare plant, you got multiple issues to deal with. Speaking of plants, they who hold up the rest of the world, We track about 1,100 species total. 950 of them are on the what do we call them? Watch list species or threatened or endangered. On the left is the sandplain Gerardia, also called the sandplain agellinus. And this one, as its name tells you, it prefers sand plains. And the only places where we now have those, we don't have them on the Eastern Shore anymore. They've grown up, so there's no longer a whole lot of open sandy soil. So we don't have too many habitats that will support the sandplain agellinus. And on the right, you'll see the crested coral root, which is a type of orchid. And it is believed to have been extirpated from the state until a very recent discovery. So it is back from outer space. We don't know where it went, but it is back. But it is now still listed as an endangered species. It's no longer endangered extirpated, it is back. But its preferred habitat is to live on dead plant material. A lot of our orchids are saprophytic. This is one of them. Oh, and if you didn't know, we have over 50 species of orchid in Maryland. Most of them are in decline or are a listed species. Not surprising because they're pretty. They're vulnerable to people collecting them. And they also don't sprout up every year anyway. They will very often lie dormant in the soil until habitat conditions are right. And they are largely parasitic as well, so their host plant also needs to be there to support them. In the case of the crested coral root, it's not that kind of a parasite. And just to talk about a couple of rare plants that you might find near Frederick, the swamp pink, which, as its name tells us, likes a particular kind of wetland. It's a beauty. I love swamp pinks. That is an S2, means not as rare as it could be, but it's on its way there. It is state endangered, but it is federally listed as a threatened plant. And on the right, you'll see golden seal. Golden seal isn't particularly flashy, although it is very interesting. I think the leaves, the veination on the leaves is really fascinating. But it is popular as a medicinal plant. So as people get back into foraging, they're seeing a lot of plants that are listed as appropriate for or have medicinal uses, like golden seal, like ginseng. We're finding that a lot of people are collecting these. And the thing about collecting rare plants is they belong to the owner of the property where they grow. That's the law. Wildlife belongs to the people in general, but plants belong to the person who owns the property where they are growing. And some people just trespass and poach. What about communities? My program also tracks rare communities, and a community is a combination of plants and animals on the landscape with particular characteristics. And we could be talking about hydrology. What's the water? What is the slope and aspect of the land? What kind of soil is it? That can be sort of looked at as a single unit. And we do indeed track some communities. For instance, the bald cypress communities in Southern Maryland, or serpentine barrens, which you can see at Soldier's Delight, but you can also see at Pilot Serpentine Barrens, which is a property operated by the Nature Conservancy. There's a serpentine barren up near Fair Hill. So on a stripe really that goes through Harford County, Baltimore County, and then south all the way down to Alabama in some cases, you will find serpentine, but it has a very particular bedrock and therefore particular soil and therefore particular plants and therefore particular animals that rely upon it. Other rare communities that we track include Baymouth Barrier Wetlands, which is the upper left there. It's a very fascinating type of wetland that can only occur in certain places on the landscape. Baymouth, and then there's usually a barrier of sand that used to be a sand spit upon which plants have grown and created this community. But we also have wonderful things out in Western Maryland called shale barrens. So cool, shale barrens. The shale, the soil, supports a very interesting combination of plants. And we have learned that it is a fire-dependent community. So if you do not have fire in that community, the plant composition changes, and therefore the animals. So what we learned is when we did our very first prescribed burn there years ago, as soon as the fire was done and things started, plants start coming back within 10 days after a prescribed burn. Plant composition, species number, species richness changed by 73% once fire went through, because there were seeds that were just waiting in the seed bank for the fire to come through and clear off some of that excess duff and create the right conditions. And blam, so many more species came up the next year. It was so cool. And you can find shale barrens at Greenridge State Forest, Greenridge State Forest. They are a globally rare type of shale outcrop, and we just happen to have them here because of the shape of the Appalachians. And you can see some pretty wonderful pine woodlands in Wills Mountain State Park at the top of the mountain. And again, it's these outcrops, these rocky outcrops that are part of the shape of this community. Speaking of natural areas, back in 2022, the legislature passed the Irreplaceable Natural Areas Act, which tasked us in the Natural Heritage Program to identify these areas of nature, of natural features that include rare plants and animals, or might have a rare geologic feature that is in really good shape or could be in good shape, but we should probably put some effort into doing some restoration. And we came up with a list of 326 irreplaceable natural areas. And what this does is provide a little more information for people. And indeed, you can read the write-ups for all of these. Each of your counties has a list of the irreplaceable natural areas found in that county, and it explains what is significant about it that makes it an INA. And it is hoped that this additional information will garner additional support so that we can get the funding and the support to do the restoration that will maintain these natural areas. Because conservation is never a one and done. There's always maintenance. So why, indeed, does this happen in the first place? Why do things become endangered? Well, you can ask the hippo. Habitat loss. Not surprising. You can see on the maps next to it how much has turned from natural space or green space to urban space from 73 to 2010. The encroachment by invasive species, which used to be third on the list, but they've worked their way up to the second place. Their moms are very proud. Invasive species can come here from many different areas and by many different ways. So these could be species that were brought in by colonial settlers 400 years ago. They could be things that are coming in now as landscaping plants. They could have come in as packing material. Or they could have wafted in, stuck on a boat. I mean, if we're talking about zebra clams or Asiatic clams, they could have come in ballast water. The nutria was introduced as someone's idea of a fur farm. He thought he could grow nutria and sell their furs. Turns out nutria fur is not really loved. It's coarse and uncomfortable for people to wear. And so he just released the animals into the wild on the Eastern Shore. But in 2015, nutria were finally declared eradicated from Maryland. But their numbers are on the rise down in Louisiana. So, someone's always working on this. Pollution. Back in the early 70s, this meant a big smokestack or a big pipe pumping brown gooey effluent into our waterways. That is no longer really the face of pollution, thanks to the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. Now pollution can be tracked to things like Yes, agricultural holdings, but also runoff from roads and parking lots, or runoff from people's lawns. There are a lot of different ways that we can classify pollution. Point source and non-point source are just the two easiest ways. Human population. As the human population expands, we need more room. We need more stuff. We need a place to live, which means we're taking habitat away from somebody else. And we could do that in a more thoughtful fashion. Or overharvesting. And this could be hunting or poaching or picking plants. Did you know that white-tailed deer were almost extirpated in Maryland by 1920? Yes, white-tailed deer. Because they were being overharvested starting around the 1870s with market hunting. And they were almost gone. And so a moratorium was put on the hunting. And by the 1980s, they were doing fine, thank you. And their population shot up to where it is now, where it's almost what it was at European settlement, which is like 275,000 to 300,000 deer. It's currently somewhere around 220,000 deer. That's the size of our current whitetail herd. So we know the causes. Why should we care? Well, this is a global living planet index, and you can see that there's been a 69% decrease in biological diversity on over 5,000 species that are monitored globally. Those numbers are declining. We know this. It's measurable. But why should we care? Why should we in Maryland care? Can you imagine if any of our state symbols went away? All of these species, rockfish, blue crabs, oysters, have had at some point or another a moratorium on their harvesting in the past 100 years, because we've recognized that they have value beyond food or beyond recreational enjoyment. And our state bird, the Baltimore Oriole, as a lot of neotropical migrant birds, their problems are twofold, both here where they breed and south of here where they overwinter. So it requires partnerships and cooperation between us and other countries in order to maintain their habitat so they can fulfill their life cycle. Again, why should we care? Well, if we want to eat or stay alive, caring is good. The squash bee, that particular little bee species is about the size of, is a little bit smaller than your pinky fingernail. And we know that our native bees and many of our native insects are vitally important pollinators. So without them, we would have to spend over $3 billion a year on pollination services, not just in Maryland, but that's in the United States. What about chocolate? Chocolate comes from a tree, the cacao tree. The blossoms on a cacao tree, which when fertilized create pods, those blossoms are fertilized by a little fly that looks suspiciously like a mosquito. And if we did not have that mosquito, we would not have chocolate. Spider silk has medical applications to help with tissue repair, both soft tissue repair, and they're working on nerve tissue repair, but also for musculoskeletal repair, because it's basically protein, and it is something that can be, we're studying, not we, but scientists are studying the protein in spider silk to figure out different ways that it can be used in healing. Likewise, the venom of a copperhead is used in cancer treatment, because it turns out that copperhead venom, yes, we know it is cytotoxic, it kills cells, but it can be made to kill only the cells of a tumor. And this is in this case, it's particularly applicable for breast cancer. And Ellicott City, anytime it rains a little bit more than heavy, Ellicott City gets flooded. Why is that? Because the natural areas upstream of Ellicott City have been altered. And so now there is a whole lot of runoff that was not there before, because there are no longer trees and there's no longer green space, which is catching that water and filtering it before it hits the river. So it behooves us to look at the way that we organize our lives, our human habitat, to see if we can do it without causing additional problems downstream. We know that nature is vitally important for human health. Those of you who have read Robin Wall Kimmerer's books know that in some native languages, the terms for plants translates to those who take care of us. We don't recognize that enough, how vitally connected we are to plants. We know that, I mean, doctors are now prescribing people outside time. If they've got high blood pressure or they're stressed, a doctor might prescribe you go stand outside in nature somewhere, look at a tree for 30 minutes. It will lower your blood pressure. It can reduce your cortisol load. And as Doug Ptolemy tells us, it will be the plants we use in our gardens that will determine what nature will look like in 10, 20, and 50 years from now. So what can we do? Well, let's go back to the hippo. We can address every one of these. How do we do that? You can support your local wildlife. Create habitat for them. Better yet, don't destroy habitat in the first place. But if you do, how about you restore some habitat? How do you do that? You can plant natives. If you make only one decision about planting this year, let it be to plant native species. And if you can, use local ecotype native species or lens. That means it is evolved to the conditions of the area where you are. Remove invasive species. We brought them in the first place. We can take them out. You can, and this is my commercial, you can support the Natural Heritage Program on your tax return. Line 35 on the Maryland state tax return is the Chesapeake Bay and Endangered Species Fund. If you choose to donate in that fund, which is the only place that you can actually say when your tax dollars go to a particular program, the money collected for the Chesapeake Bay and Endangered Species Fund gets divvied up between the Chesapeake Bay Trust, which does environmental education, and my program, which does rare species management. If you feel so moved the next time you do your taxes, we'd appreciate it. But it's not all doom and gloom. We know there are success stories. Of course, the bald eagle, it's the national symbol. It's charismatic. It's megafauna. It's got everything going for it, and it still took us 40 years, 4 decades, to get its populations in the lower 48 back to where the second highest number of breeding bald eagle pairs east of the Mississippi. Number 1 is Florida. And as you could probably guess, since the eagle's favorite food is fish, the reason eagles are here is because of the Chesapeake Bay. But you will find them near large bodies of water west of the Chesapeake Bay. So most of our large reservoirs have at least one eagle nest active and breeding eagles. As I mentioned before, the black bear used to be a rare species. It's not anymore. Now the numbers are so successful that one of the ways that we manage that bear population is through hunting. I know it's not popular with everyone, but it lets us know that there are enough bears, given the habitat that we have available to them. They are repopulating quite successfully. Speaking of bats and white nose syndrome, where white nose syndrome first broke out in New York State near Albany 20 some years ago, there are some bats that are recovering. They apparently have some form of natural resistance. We are still waiting with our fingers crossed to find out if that is going to help our bat populations here in Maryland. And as I mentioned earlier about rare insects that need a rare plant, well, as it turns out, if you restore habitat for that rare plant, the rare insects come back. This is the wild lupin or sundial lupin. It is the larval host plant of the frosted elfin butterfly. And this happened accidentally. One of our Eastern Shore ecologists was out driving along the road. He found lupin at the side of the road where he did not expect to see it. And he rooted around a little more and found out who owned the property. And he got permission from the company that owned this loblolly pine plantation. And it was a private forestry company. And they said, sure, come on the land. We just did a clear cut though, so it's probably not very pretty. Turns out when you clear cut loblolly pine and you release everything that's in the understory, wild lupin comes back on its own. And once the wild lupin is back, the butterfly finds it again. And the state, have since purchased that property. It's now part of Pocomoke State Forest. And we have been doing additional removal of trees so that we are having impact on the type of forest that comes back. It's actually a woodland. It's an open canopy type of woodland. And it's on this sandy 20,000-year-old sand dune, which is what the lupin likes and which is what the elfin likes. So sometimes all you have to do is build the right habitat and they will come. Another thing that you can do, if you see a rare species, we have a reporting form on our website. No, we no longer have elk in Maryland, although we did once. Oh, this is a great picture. There are resources online. We can help you identify invasive species and give you suggestions on how to control those invasive species. Just know that invasive species management is job security. There's always more. If you're interested in figuring out what kind of plants to plant in your area, go to our Wild Acres website. We have all sorts of fact sheets and additional resources on which plants are appropriate, how to plant for hummingbirds, how to plant for butterflies, how to plant for bees, etc. How to build a meadow. If you're interested in finding more about individual species, check out NIS and very often photographs, which is a volunteer excellent database of all things lovely, mostly photo-driven database. And I'm losing connection, that anybody can look at, marylandbiodiversity.com. Finally, if you want to see our lists, they are on our website. Thank you very much for having me. If you have any additional questions, you can email me, or that's my office line in Annapolis. Is there greater biodiversity along the fall line waterways? The cool thing about Maryland, and I am not from Maryland, so I have come to this conclusion grudgingly, is that we are perfectly situated on the landscape. We are the southern edge of many northern species. We are at the northern end of many southern species. And we have habitat from saltwater ocean to the tops of mountains. We have all different types of wetlands. We have so many different kinds of rivers, fast flowing, slow, warm water, cold water. At the fall line, you get this overlap of Piedmont species and coastal plain species. And very often they'll reach a little bit into the adjacent physiographic province. So I don't know the number exactly about whether there is greater biodiversity, but along the fall line is where you can expect to see a lot of species that might be centralized elsewhere, but they come together in the edges there. Is there anything that hasn't been biologically reduced by humans? There are quite a number of species that are doing very, very well because of humans. White-tailed deer, frankly. We have created a great deal of edge habitat, which is what white-tailed deer like. That's why there are so many of them. Invasive species, they're doing very well outside of their natural range because they are in a place where they don't have their natural controls. And people get on me because I talk about, oh, those Asian species that are here in North America. Just so you know, there are plenty of North American species that are a problem elsewhere. Just go to England and ask them their opinion on the eastern gray squirrel and then duck. Not anybody's favorite mammal. So there are those species that really like edge habitat, edges between forests and field or forests and suburban landscape. Those animals are doing quite well. Those who have a narrow habitat niche are the ones that are vulnerable. Those species that have value to someone are considered vulnerable. And there are a lot of species that used to be considered nasty weeds and we did not like them and they've got yanked out, that we are now growing as native species because we finally learned that they are vital to our ecosystem and our wild neighbors. So it's a big question. But there are some species that are doing very, very well because they are adaptable to the human habitat.